Hello everyone. Today we have none other than Pat Rigsby as a guest, a successful entrepreneur, coach, and author. Pat, from his humble beginnings, has created many successful multi-million dollar businesses, and is probably the only person I know of that has achieved that elusive work-life balance, for he accomplished all of that while still being able to give the time, attention, and focus to his family. So welcome, Pat, and I'm really excited to have you as a guest.
Wow, thanks. That was a flattering intro, and I'm happy to dig in and connect with you guys and share today. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you need to write that intro down, Pat. You can use that for your next Perform Better. That was pretty good.
Hey, yeah, that made me sound way cooler than I ever thought I was. So that's great.
And that's nothing but the truth, because I know a lot of people who have made multi-million dollars, but the way you've really done it, and you've really been the pioneer in setting up that ideal business blueprint, and you embody it, Pat. You embody it, you live it, and I guess that's what I want to dive in on a little bit, how you got to go about that in your journey. So, Tom, turning it over to you. What do we have?
Pat, I want to take you back. How many years you've been doing this? I mean, when's your first day in fitness?
First day in the commercial side of fitness probably was about 2003. I had worked in the university kind of side of things as a baseball coach, strength coach. I taught in the sports science department, that sort of thing, and then made the shift at the end of 2002, beginning of 2003.
Okay, yeah, you started mainstream, right?
Yep. I started kind of moonlighting as a personal trainer because I was doing baseball instruction and that sort of stuff in the afternoon. So there wasn't a whole lot of market for that early in the mornings. Started doing some training, ran the personal training department. They had outsourced it. And really what at the time was the biggest franchisee of Gold's Gyms. I guess in the industry at the time, the Royce Pulliam and that whole group thing. I knew you would smile when I mentioned that, right? So I was doing a little training for all the gyms that they owned in Kentucky, and then had an opportunity to kind of plug in and have a training business inside a health club in a smaller town in central Kentucky that kicked off in 2004. And then opened up a health club that had a kind of a separate but similar training business inside of it that I own in 2005.
Yeah, I remember those days, the 2005. That was an adventure, right? I remember you saying that you would heavily advise not to go that path again. So tell us about that. I mean, you've had a lot of ups, but you've had your ass kicked a few times. And man, I think that's really your ability to help people today is because you've been beaten so badly as a kid. That one didn't work out well, I don't think. Tell us about that one.
Well, so the first training business, it worked out great until it stopped working out great, right? Like it was inside a health club. The cash flow was great. The profit was great. And then when it came time to renew the lease, they were just like, sorry, man, you guys are making too much money. We're going to take this in-house. And we were just left, right? We, ended up getting kind of pennies on the dollar, selling the receivables based to them so they could take that over. But so that was a tough one. The health club side of things, there was like, it started off, we did a really good job in, I think, pre-sale. We were franchisee 33 of the Anytime Fitnesses. And then the training business was something that we owned inside of it. So it wasn't kind of hey, we're just selling training and billing it through Anytime. It was a separate company. And it all took off pretty well. And then we just, for whatever reason, I think, thought, got ahead of ourselves, probably, right? Like said, hey, we're going to start spending more money, everything to that point having been broke. everything to that point had been as bootstrapped as it could possibly be. And, started spending money on billboards, started spending money on, any number of different types of advertising mediums, be it radio spots and TV spots and whatever else, because everything bootstrapped had gone well. So, hey, we're just going to reinvest in it, right?
Logical.
And that didn't work so well. So next thing you know, it's like, wow, you know what? We're making decent money from a growth standpoint, and it's less money than we're spending. And the thing about it is, all that stuff it wasn't like Facebook ads are today, right? If you sign on to run billboards, this is a contractual obligation. This isn't, hey, we'll turn it off tomorrow. Same thing with the radio spots and TV spots. So there was more outgoings than incomings, and that kind of was a big wake-up call. I know for me, it was like, you know what? Maybe you're not quite as smart as you think you are. You don't have this golden touch that everything works out. Maybe you need to get back to what got you here. And that's when I kind of doubled down on everything being very much bootstrap, maximizing the relationship value of every client that we had, whether it be generating referrals or moving more of them into personal training, and just really, I hate to say it, and I've heard, the quotes dating back to guys like Walt Disney saying, like, everybody needs a good hard failure at some point early on to kind of get them back in line. And so I think, I was just pretty grateful that didn't just result in bankruptcy on the spot.
Watching, that's when I first met you back in those early days. That most guys don't have that wherewithal mentally to pivot. They get caught down a path. You were in mainstream. I mean, and looking at Royce, I mean, that's something that could have sank your career, because those guys were, I use the word creative here. But also, as a side note, I guarantee anybody under 30 is scrambling now doing a Google search to find out what the hell a billboard is. Just throwing that out there. So, but that type, I mean, most guys don't survive that. They go down one path, and to be able to pivot from mainstream into training business, I mean, that was you explain that, but go deeper on that, because most guys don't survive that process. And you're dealing with a lot of guys now, I know in your mentorships and stuff, the guys they're at that stage of life where if they don't move, they die. But man, that was such a great lesson you did there. Go deeper with that. I like that.
Well, so, I think the way that I always viewed it is at least was, I had been a coaching guy, having been a baseball coach, having the first training business being, hey, we just did the service stuff, the training stuff. And I got out of my lane by going into the membership side. I was always kind of a high touch, result focused person. And the membership side, I felt in hindsight, I don't know if this will land with anybody else. It's like, you see people who do really well in this one industry, and they're like, I'm going to open up a restaurant or a bar or whatever. And I'm like, man, this isn't just like you're universally good at everything. And I think I learned very quickly. I'm like, this isn't my sweet spot. This, like, what I'm good at really stemmed a lot from the baseball stuff. Like, I am, in coaching college athletes, you connect with somebody and you follow up for maybe a year before you get a commitment. And that was the stuff that I was best with: the relationship building, the player development, and transferring that to training and client development. And it was kind of getting back to my strengths and saying, look, I don't really care what these, what these bigger businesses that I had been exposed to, or what I was seeing, whatever they were doing, or whatever seemed kind of like the sexier option at the time, is like, this is the stuff I'm good at. I need to do more of that. I need to go deeper with that. I need to see how I can get maybe 1 degree away from it and really build on it. And once I kind of dug into that, the business definitely course corrected, got back on the right track, and it became a training business that sold memberships until ultimately, I got into more of the, hey, I'm just going to serve training businesses in general.
Was that 2005 you made that run? 2006 in there?
Yeah, it was probably 2006 was kind of that course correct or go under moment.
Yeah. I was telling Sumit that there was a dark period in the mainstream fitness industry where, today it's, guys like you on one side, Saladino, all these training, Cosgrove went here, and the mainstream guys, most people don't understand it's 2 separate industries. So not many guys got out alive from that era. So that was, and then you went right into your own training gym at that point, right?
Yeah, it was back to, we still had the contractual obligations there. So we kind of just morphed that into a training gym that, the downsell was, hey, you can get a membership. And so we really kind of re-engineered that. We still had the other training business inside of a health club. And, it really just became, hey, everything's training. And in the one gym, if you won't do training, then sure, we'll let you have access for a membership. And almost it was like a self-liquidating offer. It was just, hey, we'll pour the membership money back into, making the training side go.
15 years later, Anytime's trying to figure out that model again. You were 15 years ahead of your time.
And to their credit, at the time, when we were doing that, they were like, how is your draft for training higher than your draft for memberships? And there was even the idea of, hey, do you want to do something industry wide or, franchise wide with all of our people? But at the time, those guys had 500 members a club. It was definitely not the robust thing that it is now. And I'm like, man, I can't manage a training business with 500 members where they're signing up 10 a month in Montana somewhere. And so we didn't go that route. And, I think it's worked out in some ways when they've tried to do other things since. But, to their credit, even when we went and started our own training franchise, they were fine. They were supportive, and they could have probably thrown plenty of roadblocks in the way.
Yeah, could have back then. Sumit, I'm stepping all over him here. What do you got?
No, this is great. I did want to ask Pat, picking up on the theme, Tom, that you mentioned, Pat's been ahead of his time all the time. So talk about this being ahead of 15 years, and still with people are trying to figure this thing out. Pat, you got into online fitness even before online fitness was a thing. So how does this happen to you? Or what are the cues that you look for? I guess I want to understand not so much as to how you went about doing it, but why. What are the shifts that you see? What are you reading? What are you doing that gives you these triggers to say, this is where I need to put my energy and time on next?
I appreciate the way that you frame that, but I always thought of it as like desperation-based problem solving. Okay. And again, it started as a college baseball coach. We had the smallest budget in our conference. We had no scholarships, so I had to find creative ways to win. When we started a training business, the first training business was about 12 miles from the Fort Knox military base. And so we would have a lot of people who would come in, they would become clients, and they would get transferred. And usually it was like a spouse of somebody who was enlisted or whatever. But occasionally it was people who just wanted a change of scenery and didn't want to be on post for everything, right? But when they would get transferred, it was like, well, how do we hang on to, you know, some of this receivables base? How do we keep them paying us? And it was like, hey, you know what? We can still design your program. We can coach you up and give you something to do, even when you get shipped to Fort Campbell or Fort Bragg or whatever. And so, you know, we were able to keep a lot of those people paying. And it would just be, we're going to design a program for you. We'll email it to you. If you have questions, you can email or you can call. There was no texting. There was no Facebook group, nothing like that. It was, you can email or you can call if you have questions, and we'll just design you a new program every month. And, you know, before long, there were probably 50, 60 people that are doing that. It was just kind of the, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like they were going to move. So we were either going to find a way to keep them involved, or we were going to lose the revenue from those people.
Okay. Yeah, that might be one of the greatest business principles of all time is desperation management. I had drinks with Mike Grondel, just when he was leaving Planet Fitness, and we were up way too late in Las Vegas. And I said, man, how did you do this? And he goes, I was 2 months away from losing my gym. I had no choice. I had to come up with something. And then that was it. And I think he had a world gym at the time, and it was going down, and he was behind almost a year in the rent as a story, and sold his way out of it $10 at a time. But he said the same thing, Pat. It's just desperation, man. It just drives you to another level of creativity. Yeah, that's you're gonna have to start teaching that in your mentorships more. I think that's a good principle.
Well, you know, there are a lot of people who, when they're kind of punched in the face with something, they'll complain about it, they'll dwell on it, they'll get consumed by it. I think, you know, if I've had any one kind of professional trait that has served me better than anything else, it's been that I immediately just kind of start searching for solutions the minute I kind of sniff a problem. And, you know, sometimes they work out great. Sometimes they're harebrained things that don't go anywhere. But, you know, I think that if you look hard enough, there's probably a solution to most of the problems we encounter.
Yeah. So looking back, man, 20 years you've been doing this. So the single biggest, I won't say mistake, inefficiency, but the single biggest thing you regret in this career, where you said, oh man, if I had that shot again, but what could you teach a young guy there about that type of stuff?
I mean, I've got a couple, but the first one is just going too wide, doing too many things instead of being really good in a narrower lane, right? When some of the opportunities started to present themselves online where, you know, it was like, hey, you guys are doing really well here. Can you get involved with me with this? I'll give you this equity, or I'll sell you this equity at a discount. And next thing you know, it's like I'm a co-owner of 15 different businesses, and that means I'm not doing any of them really well. And it's like, you know, if you just stay with this core thing and just make it better and pour yourself into it, how far could that have gone? I mean, and there was a point where, you know, we founded this franchise that was really a conversion-based franchise. So a little bit different than a lot of the ones that are out there. You know, had 275 locations. And I'm like, man, if I would have just kept the blinders on instead of dabbling in all these other things, how big could that have been? How much impact could that have had? So when I found myself kind of screwing things up, it's always been because I was spinning too many plates.
Yeah, good story.
Yeah.
So the darkest day, the brokest day of your life, when you're sitting on the curb, just wishing God would take you home, just that day.
Gosh. It wasn't business. It was being forced to resign as a college baseball coach. That was my entire identity at the time. I was on billboards. I was on TV commercials.
Oh,
I was the winningest coach in any male sport in school history, and then had a kind of a hissing match, so to speak, with the vice president, and I clearly lost. And it was like, well, you're going to be forced to resign, and you get this severance, or you can get fired. And so I tucked my tail and walked, and that was probably the, in many ways, why it wasn't in business, because it certainly gave me a thicker skin and made me a lot more tolerant of rejection or anything like that. But that was it. It was, my entire identity kind of being yanked away. It was like, okay, well, this is what I've made my career about. I've got to start over here.
Oh, yeah, that's a great story. And you're going to have to write that one out sometime. That's because most guys, I don't think, handle that well either. Everybody gets that reset once in a while. How you react to it. Yeah, there's a good moral in that story. Yeah, you're going to have to write that one out, I think. Big detail. So let me go another direction with that. So how does your story end? How do you get out of this? What's the exit strategy?
I think I probably have a completely different view of that than I would have had, a decade ago. It would have been, hey, build something up and get a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, sell it off. At this point, it's probably more of a, hey, I'm going to keep refining what I do, staying in my lane, doing the things that I like to do, which is helping, pretty much independent fitness business owners who are doing good work, helping them kind of build the business that they want to have. And if anything, like if we're talking about a retirement time or anything like that, it's more like narrowing and being pickier about who I work with and what I do, which to be honest has been happening for probably the last 3, 4, 5 years. And I don't have any urgency to do that. Heck, I got a 10-year-old, so I got plenty of bills facing me coming up. But I think that that's my professional purpose, right? To go coach people. I really get a lot of fulfillment out of coaching people. I just think that as I've evolved in this, who I coach and what I coach has definitely narrowed, and I could just totally see me continuing to narrow that as I go.
You ever dream someday of just running away and being a baseball coach again? I thought you would. That's a loaded question, because I remember talking to you a couple of times at Perform Better, and I thought, well, he's about 6 feet away from hitting the door hard.
It's like the perfect scenario now. I coached my older one who's off in college now. Now I coach the younger one, and I love doing that. I could never go back and work at a university or something like that. I mean, I'm sure you probably feel the same way, but being employed in a bureaucratic setting is like fingernails on a chalkboard to me.
Yeah, it's taking you 20 years to become completely unhireable in the real world.
100%. So I think I've kind of got the best of both worlds now, being able to coach, without that, and still do the things that I really like doing professionally.
Well, Sumit, I'm jump in here. Take him another direction.
All right. So I'm going to take him back to the point where you mentioned, Pat, about how you reset after you got fired or resigning from the baseball coach thing. You've had a number of those events in your life, right? You've had to reset multiple times, and it's coming at different phases. You were single then. Yep, it helps you to cope better. But now you've got a wife, you've got a kid, you're dealing with your kid's illness. Now you're dealing with the fitness revolution sell off. Every time that's happening, what are you telling yourself? Like, how are you going past those darkest days, if you will, because you built something, you built them from the grounds up. You're like, never, ever again, this is going to happen. But this happens. So you have that choice. You're like, you can be miserable in it, or you decided not to. What's going on in your head? I want to tap into that. Like,
so with all of the stuff outside of when my younger son Alex got sick with his autoimmune condition, the rest of them, honestly, after the baseball thing, it was more of a I've been through this before, I've got this mentality, whether that's blind faith or what, but I felt like, okay, I've done this, I'm making this next step, knowing what I have more information in my mental vault. I've got more experience. This next thing will be better. If anything, I mean, and this is when Tom asked me kind of the biggest mistake, the second place on that list was hanging with everything a year too long. Every one of the things that I looked at that I moved on from was like, I left a year too late on all of them. And so there was never like this, oh, what am I going to do panic type of thing, because I mean, like I said, after the baseball thing, it was like, man, I've got this. The rest of those, I felt confident that my experiences, my skills, my strengths, my network, that sort of thing, I was going to be able to do something better and different with what I had learned. So I don't think that ever was causing me the doubt that it might cause some people. Honestly, I mean, it was very much like that in the pandemic here when this kicked off too. I just immediately kind of defaulted to like, man, I'm in the right place in the right time for this. If there's anybody who can help people be adaptable, I've been pretty adaptable. And I think that helped me tremendously. Like you alluded to the stuff with my son, and you know, he's got this autoimmune condition called PANS, which is like if he were to get a virus or like a bacterial infection, it might trigger something that causes like brain inflammation. And, you know, knock on wood, I think all that stuff's pretty well under control. And he's, you know, seemingly a pretty happy, healthy kid. But for a while, I mean, it was kind of like our world just shut off and that was the focus. That was really the only time that, you know, I didn't feel like, man, I've got this, because it was just uncharted territory. And and Suman, I've told you this, I think that probably helped me be a little more grounded when the pandemic started. I'm like, man, this is nothing for me compared to what we just went through a year ago.
Right.
So yeah, man, I think challenges, circumstances, events, whatever you'd like to call them, they're coming our way one way or the other. There's always going to be something, whether it's the economic downturn we saw back in 2008, 2009, whether it's the pandemic. I mean, there's going to be something. And, you know, how you respond to it is probably going to dictate your outcomes. And so I've worked pretty diligently towards being better at my response and dwelling less on the circumstances.
That's beautifully stated. So here's the thing, Pat. Like, I guess the challenge is most people know that, right? Control the narrative, you can control how you respond. We know that, but you embody executing that. So what are the habits, if you will? What's your behavior like, or are there any coping mechanisms when you go through those phases that's like, okay, here we go again, but you know what, it's going to be okay because, and I'm dealing it with like here are my go-to steps. I don't know. I mean, is there something like that?
I don't think that, I think you used a very valuable term like coping mechanism. Like me seeking solutions, immediately diving into something is definitely my coping mechanism for problems. It is not, hey, I'm going to go drink myself into a stupor. It's not, I'm going to go do this thing or that thing. My coping mechanism is this kind of dive into problem solving, whatever it is. Even like when my son got sick, it was reading everything I could read and calling everybody I could call. And sometimes it might even just be the illusion of I'm doing something, right? But it's, for me, that's how I cope with problems. Is I'm searching out solutions, I'm trying things, because I just, I probably have some deep-seated fear inside of being helpless and not being able to control any of what's going on. And I think some of that comes from being a baseball coach, where it was like, man, I have no recourse here. I can't go repair this relationship. I can't do, like, if he wants me out, I'm out. And so I've continually just said, okay, when I'm hit with something, I may make a list of, here are potential ideas for solutions. I may dive in and start researching or studying things. If I were to coach somebody on the confidence building side of it, I think we're really good at focusing on the gap, right? Like how far we still have to go, or, where we're not. I think that most of us that have had any sort of entrepreneurial success, we've got plenty of things in our rear view mirror that are what Dan Sullivan calls the game, right? Like things we've accomplished. I do not ignore that. I use that to give me a little bit of confidence that I can do this, that I can go and do the next thing. And I tend to try to borrow from all of my previous experiences. And, if I have to tweak something that worked at this point, then I'm going to, tweak it and apply it. I don't look at things and just start from a blank page. It's like, well, what do I know that has worked when I've had my back up against the wall in the past? And I try to draw from that because it gives me a little confidence, because I know that I've executed it and I've succeeded with it before.
Okay.
Let me take you down a new path. Change the subject. Okay, this would be better over 3 glasses of wine late at night, but
we'll do that too.
Yes, we will. Dumbest client you ever had, and why? What were the behaviors that made that person? You just, even with your experience, look at the guy and go, I can't help this guy. He's so, because I think there's a lesson in there when you see that client that's just their own worst enemy. So tell me, we've all got that. They usually do come out after 3 glasses of wine. But again, the client where you just, it's the one that still haunts you, makes you crazy. Tell us about that person.
And there have been a few of the same, right? And it's invariably the person that hires you or hires me to keep doing what they're doing and expect a different result, right? To hey, I'm going to pay you, but I'm not going to listen to anything that you say. I'm going to vent about my problems. I'm going to be unwilling to change, unwilling to execute. And then I'm going to be angry at you because things didn't magically transform into this better outcome. And you know, and there have been a number of them over time thinking that, man, if I pull my credit card out, all these problems go away. Like, no, I mean, you probably have to change the behaviors that led you down this path in the first place.
So what's the lesson for the rest of the guys that do want to change? Tell me the lessons in there.
I mean, first and foremost, you have to accept that the outcome that you have is a reflection of who you currently are and the things that you currently do or have done. So we want a different outcome. We're going to have to do different things. We're probably going to have to get out of our comfort zone. We're going to have to probably change the way that we personally operate, not just the way the business operates. Because, you know, I mean, a lot of times you may have good people, but if you're leading them poorly, then, you know, they're not going to be able to right the ship without you. You know, so I think it's just, you know, the acceptance that, man, different outcomes require change, and if you're not up for change, then there's nothing I can do to help.
It's sad it takes so long for them to process that, though. It's almost more frustrating being you carrying that guy for 6 months than that guy sometimes. It's a beating.
The interesting thing is the people that we coach, the people that we serve, they're teaching the same thing. Like, you want a different health outcome, a different body composition outcome, a different performance outcome, you got to change behaviors. You got to adopt new habits. You've got to operate in a different way. So they teach it. So it's like, hey, I'm selling it, but I'm not buying
it. Good point. Well put together there. That's fine. So, Sil, what else you got on your list?
So since you talked about the worst client, if you will, I want to talk about, tell us a client that touched your heart, Pat. Like, you're like, that made you feel like, yeah, there are two sides. Like, tell us a client that really touched your heart and you'll be like, you know what? I love what I'm doing, or even changed your outlook towards your life, your career, the way you process things.
You know, there have been plenty of wonderful clients. I can think of one person offhand, and I won't use his name. Assuming you would probably know him through description, but just because, like, you know, he grew up in like a trailer park. He has an incarcerated father. He's got all the makings of a guy who's not going to do well, right? Like, and you want to talk about the quintessential, like, if I say, hey, you should go do this, he goes and does it, and probably does it beyond any expectation that I would have. And now, you know, he's got a wonderful boutique training business that, you know, does $500,000 a year and, I don't know, like 1,600 square feet or something. It's crazy. No paid advertising at all. Zero. It's all relationship stuff, referral stuff, culture where people just are so excited to spread the word. He's built a little bit of personal wealth already, still relatively young. And so that sort of thing, for me, it's like the coolest thing possible, right? Because it's kind of that whole rags to riches type of story. And he's got what I would consider, if somebody's going to throw excuses or circumstantial challenges out there and say, hey, this is why I'm not doing this, he's probably got as many relatively valid ones as anybody could come up with. And man, it didn't slow him down for a second. And I look at that and it's like, man, this is why you do this, because this guy change the entire trajectory of his life. You know, if they have kids, it's probably going to change the trajectory of their life. These clients are getting this wonderful experience because, I mean, how much he cares about their success just kind of pours out of him on a daily basis. So, you know, when I look at like a true coaching business, like he's the embodiment of it. And, you know, so that's the first one that comes to mind. And honestly, we could probably sit here and I could list off a bunch of them, but that one's pretty cool.
Yeah. That is
Assume
cool.
it mine, the one that touched my heart, I ended up marrying. She was a client for 20 some years ago. She's in the other room. I'll tell you that story. Okay.
That's good. We should probably take a clip of that and send it to her. So we earn a lot of brownie points.
So my last question, Pat, You're standing up in front of 500 people. You're there, you're raging on a Friday afternoon at Perform Better. Okay, and here's the question. If I could teach you anything, it would be, that's your question to this group. And somebody goes, if you could teach us anything, Pat, what would you teach us? After this long, very successful career, you know, you're a guru, you're well respected, which in this industry, as you well know, after 20 years is a hard thing to continue with. You've done some good work out there, my friend. So, but if you could teach that 500 people anything, what would it be? Final lesson.
It would be basically kind of, how do I want to phrase this? I don't want to be abstract with it, but it's like, I'm a big believer in owning your outcomes and being a producer. Like if you want something, it's on you. And so it's not about, like, I would not be teaching a tactic. It would be this mindset of, if I want new clients, what did I do today to get new clients? If I want to improve the way that my staff functions, how did I train them better today? How did I develop systems today? It's this, you know, it's owning a business is basically saying it's on me. And having this, what I call this producer mindset, that I am going to take personal responsibility for making sure that the outcomes that I'm seeking are happening. That would be it.
Good lesson. Took you a long time to learn that. A long run. Sumit, final question for you.
Pat, tell me this. What do you believe with this long, illustrious career of yours that people still seem to misunderstand about you?
You know, I think it is funny, Tom used the word guru earlier, and when somebody says, like, you know, the way that guru gets thrown around now, it almost makes me throw up a little bit in my mouth to be, you know, with that. It's like 100%, I see myself as a coach. I see the marketing that I do as coaching people until they pay me to coach them. And, you know, I'm not interested in being the marketing tactic guy, the advertising agency guy, the fill your gym in 30 days guy. I want to coach you. You know, I want to see where you want to go, assess where you are, and help you build a path to get there and coach you along the way and help problem solve when challenges arise. Like, that's been my identity internally for as long as I can remember. And, you know, I think occasionally I will get, because people see ads in their Facebook feed or whatever else, you know, I'll get the, well, what makes you different than them? Kind of almost like the assumption that everybody who runs an ad to a fitness business owner has the same agenda, the same, you know, and like, man, I could list out about 5,000 times more things that we're different about than we're the same about. So
it's just so funny you said that. I was talking to Tom earlier, and he brought up the point about total solution. And I think that's what you embody as well. Like, how do you provide that total solution? It's not about marketing or sales or staff or team. You know, it's it's what's your ideal business? Like you frame that really well and say, hey, let's work towards making sure you get where you need to be. And here's the blueprint.
So,
yep.
Yeah. Guru's good class though, by the way. You deserve that rep. You know, and there's guys out there that have been around for a while. There's a lot of guys on the social media that make me crazy. They've been in business for like 6 weeks, you know, and you know, Guru, guys that survive, Boyle, you know, got Verstegen. There's guys out there that have paid their dues for decades that have changed a lot of lives. So yeah, wear that once in a while. Well, you earned that title in this legitimate, original, intended form. But you've definitely arrived at that stage of your life, Pat, for sure.
Well, thank you. And, you know, to be mentioned in that same category, I mean, the people that we get to share the stage with and perform better, I mean, that's the type of person I really love being associated with, not just the people who have figured out how to run a Facebook ad.
Yeah, well, Gray Cook's the only one in there, except, you know, he's sitting on his roof, smoking pot, drinking whiskey, shooting deer with a crossbow. And he's still one of the most genius people I've met. So, but when you call him a guru, I do see your pain there. But he is great. He's a legend. He's the most fun guy to hang out with, probably out there. But again, you notice I went to Verstegen and Boyle, not necessarily to the crazy side. So.
This is probably my last question, unless something else comes to my mind. As you can see, none of this is scripted. It just comes to me, which is, you know, you help so many people in getting direction, clarity about where they need to be. Where do you go for yourself? Like, you know, because you've accomplished so much, but how are you filling your cup? Like, what do you do?
I mean, there's never a time that I don't have some sort of mentorship in my life. It may be specific to a particular lane in that moment. And then I'm an avid reader of biographies of people who've done interesting, great, you know, whatever you'd like to call it, you know, achievement-oriented things. So yeah, there's always plenty of input for me. I just, you know, I think that at least on my end, what you said, the whole kind of filling your cup, I think that's key, right? Like for me, learning from other people, even if it's somebody teaching me a specific thing, they may have a really interesting way that they teach it or a way that they communicate or something like that. I'm always looking, and I tend to really get excited about looking outside of the industry and seeing what's happening in other areas, just to give me a fresh perspective. And you know, I think there's so many things that I mean, the laundry list of things I don't know is never ending, right? So, you know, I'm always excited to learn something new from somebody different. So it's never been like, hey, there's just this one person. It's like, man, there's this just a laundry list of people that I've learned from, you know, present company included.
Well, thank you. I guess that goes right to Tom. So, Tom, any last question from you? Thank you so much, Pat, for that.
No questions, Pat. That was, it's nice for people to get a chance to see the guy that has paid his dues so long. I don't think enough people to get to hear your story, get to see, you know, part of the journey here. You've had a nice run. You know, you should sit somewhere and sit down and have a glass of wine and say, yeah, it's been okay. You know, you've done some good work. So we just wanted people to kind of see that there's more to you. There's some depth. There's some, you know, it wasn't all glory days. You know, people see you now like, oh, he's always been successful. No, you know, very few of them have. And so you got a good story. Thanks for sharing it with us today. It's wonderful. You told some good stuff today. Very helpful.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys having me. I mean, I'm flattered to be able to share, and hopefully, you know, some of this lands with some of the people checking this out, because yeah, I mean, anything that's the farthest from accurate, right? It's definitely not been all home runs, right? It's definitely not all been all wins, but I think that's a lot of the fun, right? Like the journey, the process has been fun. And I, fortunately, at this stage of my life, I definitely acknowledge the wins a lot more than I would have a decade ago or beyond. You know, because they're not a given. They're not something to take for granted. So if you earned them, enjoy them.
Fair enough.
Good advice.
Pat,
Thanks, Pat, very much.
Yeah, and before we let you go, like you talked about clients, like if someone wants to get in touch with you, they want to know more about Ideal Business, how do they get to work with you? Where do they go? Can you share something about that too?
Yeah, sure. PatRigsby.com is kind of the hub of everything. You know, there are plenty of posts there. You can opt in and get copies of, you know, different books that I've written. There's short podcast episodes that go up every week. Or if somebody wants to reach out to me directly, pat@patrigsby.com. Happy to connect with people and see if I can be of any help.
Well, thank you. Well, thanks again for coming out, Pat. I appreciate it.